Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to have Lacey Kempinski with us today. And Lacey, welcome to the Cause Leadership Podcast.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Great. Glad to have you. And for those who are interested, Lacey's bio will be in the show notes. So, Lacey, just really great to have gotten to know you over the last few months. I know we still haven't met in person, so we continue our screen relationship and phone relationship, but you're doing some interesting things in the charitable sector, and I would say in some respects pioneering them a little bit. So looking forward to getting to know a bit more about your work and Balance Good. And obviously you've had a previous career as a fundraiser as well, working for other charitable organizations. So we're certainly open to hearing about your career journey as well, as far as those are concerned. So why don't we just jump into it today? And so tell us a little bit about what was the origin story of Balanced Good. It is, as I say, kind of a unique approach to the talent needs of the charitable sector in Canada.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm just excited to be here and chatting with you and sharing this story and all of my perspective with you and the podcast listeners. I appreciate that you said pioneering too, because
Yeah.
I often feel that way because there is no roadmap to what Balance Good is doing, which is essentially providing parental leave coverage in the social impact sector. So how did I get here? I think like many entrepreneurs, I got here because I needed to, because I realized that the person I wanted to be, the parent I wanted to be, and the nonprofit professional I wanted to be, I just couldn't thrive in any traditional space in our sector. I think many of us know the challenges in our sector related to just the issue of martyrdom, burnout, turnover, but also just, things like evening meetings with your board of directors, like networking, that, you have to show up in these spaces to really see a fundraising career excel. And I wanted to have that, but I also wanted to build a family. And so I'm a mom to 3 young children, and I just didn't see how those things worked together in a way that felt good to me. So I jumped out of traditional in-house fundraising. So I was a fundraising professional in the healthcare foundation space. And I started a consultancy. So it's been quite the journey, but what I've realized is that there's so many other nonprofit professionals who are struggling with these questions. And also there's leaders struggling with having team members trying to navigate these questions. So it's how do we do better for the sector, because the sector deserves better, and we don't want to keep losing talented individuals in our sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you and I agree, I think on this, that the talent challenges that charities are facing today are probably more than we've seen in recent years. I say to people that we're facing the largest leadership transition that the sector has faced in decades. And that certainly affects CEOs and EDs, but I would say it's very similar, if not potentially worse, in the fundraising space as well, because of the limited talent pool that we have. You brought up a couple of really good points, both from the fundraiser side, and I know you're not just doing fundraisers anymore,
Correct.
so we'll jump into that a little bit. But from the fundraising side, and then also from the leadership side, both are facing challenges. You've identified, burnout is certainly a real a reality for many fundraisers and leaders today. But what are the specific challenges that a leader expresses to you when they're on the phone with you saying, I need help, I've got a mat leave, or maybe more than one mat leave in some cases, I'm sure. What are some of the things that are challenging to them, and how are you helping them solve that?
Yeah, I love that question. I think for many leaders, this, as much as you probably don't want to admit it, there's this dreaded day where your star employee comes up to you and says, oh, I'm expecting. And, you want to be equally supportive of them. and celebratory, but inside you're probably crying a little bit, because how does this work go on? And then as a leader, that adds to your plate, that adds to your shoulders in terms of how do I navigate this work without either me having to do it or burning out somebody else on my team because you're reallocating work.
Right.
So I always say it's like a bittersweet moment when a team member comes and shares that news with you. So those are the conversations I have. And I think the key, important area that leaders really need to be mindful of is being prepared for this. Whether you're a small shop and there's only a few of you, to, like a national charity where you're going to have multiple team members off at multiple times, you need to have a thought out process. You need to have not just policies in place, but just like the rigor around how do we onboard a new team member to cover a short-term leave, but then how do we really thoughtfully return an employee? Because the failure to do that thoughtfully could lead to turnover in that role, which is costing your organization money.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure you must be seeing that, especially on return situations where a new parent is all of a sudden faced with the realities of a little one at home, and it doesn't matter which partner it is that's been off. What are they facing, and how are you helping them through your work transition back into the role after you've had somebody in there?
Yeah, I think for a lot of parents, no matter how you come into parenting, whether it's you're a birthing parent, you're a non-birthing parent, you've adopted, however that journey looks, you as a new parent are like facing this identity crisis, right? For many people, especially in the nonprofit sector, when we love to martyr ourselves to the cause, your work has been a huge portion of your life, and it will still continue to be. But all of a sudden you're a parent and now you're balancing these two identities. So like we really try to be intentional about how we can help that transition and how we can help that transition flow. So it's just things like tactile things, like when the parent comes back, blocking their calendar, mapping their calendar, like really holding their hand as they return back to work, updating them just on, organizational changes that have happened. Because when you step out of the workplace for 6 months, 8 months, a year, 18 months, like there's a lot that can change, right? So we do that to help the parent, but we also do that to help the leaders at the organization, because if we're not doing it, then someone else on their team has to do it, right? And so it's just adds to this seamlessness of this approach, but also showing the team members, not only the parents going on leave, but all of them surrounding them, that you value their work, you value their time, and you're going to support them.
Yeah. No, that's good. We kind of skipped a step here. Maybe let's go back to the beginning. When somebody's transitioning into a mat leave, and the individual who's leaving, but also you're putting somebody in, how does that conversation go? Does the fundraiser who's actually going on mat leave really struggle with the handoff? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people struggle. I think people are pretty welcome and excited to have somebody thoughtfully come on board.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember, and I think lots of people have the same experience, my first parental leave. I'm like, there's no handbook. I don't know how to do this. What do I have to do? And I'm like documenting every little detail. No. And I think so just having somebody come in place and say, here's the things that we actually need to know. And here's the things that, we'll be able to navigate while you're gone. That not only relieves like the person going on leave, but it also relieves like the organization and the leaders, right? Like we look at somebody's role in terms of how it breaks down into deliverables, and then we're able to work and get that done while integrating ourselves with the team. So nobody on the team feels like they don't have somebody to go to, right? So we always say, like, if you normally went to Lacey for this task, while they're on leave, continue going to this new person.
Yeah.
Right. So just to make it as seamless as possible.
And give us a picture. What is the reality of our sector when it comes to maternity leave? And as I said before, not just fundraisers anymore, not just fundraisers, but also many other roles that you're starting to help organizations fill on a mat leave basis. Um, are there some statistics around it that leaders should be aware of? Obviously there must be some legislation around some of this as well too. So important things for leaders to be aware of is in this process.
For sure. So there are statistics. And like you said, we've recently expanded our offerings to not be able to just support parental leave roles in the fundraising and communication space, but also in the leadership space,
Mm-hmm.
in operations and those kind of pieces.
Yeah.
But when we look at the sector as a whole, we typically say about 79 and you might even have better statistics here, but like 79% are female.
Mm-hmm.
I've broken that down when I kind of have dove into Statistics Canada and the number and percentage of working moms or people who identify as moms that are working, and it's a big portion. I think it's like 80% of that 79% are working parents,
Okay.
right? So there's a
Yeah.
huge portion of our sector
Yeah.
that are working parents, whether you're a new parent or you're a parent to teens. So I think that's really important to know. I also think innately when we're in this sector of caring, when we're in a sector that is highly empathetic, you have people who want to take on that caregiving role, not just in their work, but also at home.
Yes.
So you often have, for example, racialized people end up taking on more caregiving work at home and in our sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have groups of individuals who already are challenged with um, different realities. And then we're coupling on with that, trying to navigate working as a working parent in a sector that typically doesn't pay as well comparatively to other sectors. Maybe there's not access to benefits or pensions. So there's all of
Mm-hmm.
these things. And so
Yeah.
I think that's why it is so important as a leader to think about, okay, what are some things we can do to demonstrate care, to demonstrate thoughtfulness when it comes to looking at our team members as, whole humans that have lives beyond work?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, your business model, let's just talk about that a little bit, because obviously you have a group of fundraisers and other professions that are represented by Balanced Good. And how do you engage with them? How do they find you? How does that all happen? And that you're able to ultimately put them with a client?
Yeah. So for me and for Balance Good, and as we grew, it was really, really important to have full-time staff,
Hmm.
full-time permanent staff at Balance Good.
Right.
We didn't want subcontractors. We didn't want contractors. We're not a temp agency. We wanted to create meaningful, good, decent work for individuals in our sector. We have a team, there's 7 of us that are full-time permanent employees,
Hmm.
and we have a varying range of skills, and we work together to backfill that role. We're continuing to grow as an organization, with the priority being that we would continue to grow in full-time permanent capacity. We've done a lot of thoughtfulness around how we built our employee handbook, how we built our policies
Hmm.
to really model how things can be done in the sector. And we learned from a lot of our peers too, because some organizations in the sector are doing incredible things in terms of different policies, very progressive ways of thinking about work-life balance and what that looks like. Um, so, I always say like we're an open book when it comes to that. And we love sharing these kind of things with our clients because it can be done. And the benefit is that when you can prioritize employee satisfaction and creating a place where it is really good, decent work, you can retain your team. And that,
Yeah.
especially now, is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, with such a need out there too, growth is, I'm sure, somewhat organic in some respects, but also um, you're responsible for business development and all of that sort of thing, I'm sure. So, how do you balance business development for for you and your team and the realities of putting people into those maternity roles.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is these roles keep coming, right?
Yeah, I
Babies
know. I'm sure they
keep
must.
so I think that's a unique piece to the work that we're doing,
Yeah.
not just in Canada, but the US as well,
Hmm.
that, there's a continued need. And for a lot of organizations, in speaking with like their people, equity, and culture team, they'll have multiple roles off at a time. And
Yeah.
it just creates this high demand on the people, equity, and culture team for recruitment. But it also just creates like this like constant onboarding
Hmm.
and cycle in the organization. So we're hoping that we can kind of fast track some of those things. And we do
Yeah.
typically fast track onboarding and stuff just so we can get the work done
Yeah.
and make sure that the role is supported for when the person returns to work.
Yeah.
And that's, we've seen the benefits of that too. Because yes, we are going to integrate ourselves as a team member, but we don't need to build those like long-term lasting relationships within the organization
Yeah.
that someone does if they're going to be a permanent long-term employee, right?
Yeah.
We're just focused on those deliverables and making sure everybody in and around that role feels valued and seen.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So there's going to be people listening to this who are fundraisers or finance people or operations, or as you say, even leadership roles, who are going to go, I really like that business model. I'd love to be part of that. But when you're assessing who is best for your team and for your clients, what are some of the considerations that you have as far as skill sets and mindset and attitude and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff? Just curious.
Yeah, I love that question. We are very intentional with our values at Balance Good, and we lead with values first. So, um, when it comes to clients and who we work with, that's really important to us
Mm-hmm.
that we work with organizations who are also values driven, and that their values align with ours. We're very transparent, we're very direct. We really, in a kind way, we really appreciate that people are whole people, that they have lives outside of our work, and that our work is one part of our entire lives.
Yeah.
And we need to see that. And so, you know, we say we don't want to shy away from organizations who maybe struggle with things like unrealistic workloads or martyrdom, because we like to operate from this perspective that maybe we can help.
Yeah.
But in most cases, our clients are organizations that are looking at things progressively, that are trying new ways of doing things, that value their team members highly and want to see them return to work,
Yeah.
and value productivity. So I think it's like anything in life. If you lead with your values, you attract like-minded individuals, and that's been really incredible.
Mm-hmm. And the folks that would work with you at Balance Good, when you considered their skill sets, who is a good fit for Balance Good in the sense of actually working with you?
So people who would want to come to work for Balance Good are people who want to make an impact in our sector, want to change the way that our sector works. We are a group of like dynamic individuals who get work done, but then we turn off work as soon as we can too.
Yeah.
So in terms of like specific skills, one of the areas we're really wanting to lean into and grow into is in the marketing and communications realm,
Yeah.
as well as in the finance space, because we see organizations really needing support in that in terms of parental leave. And we do have some marketing and communication skill sets on our team, but not enough to meet the demand.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the areas. Right now, we're very lucky. We have major gift experience. We have leadership experience. We have annual fund experience, operations experience. And I think, again, it's people who wear their values on their sleeves and say,
Yeah.
this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is how I'm going to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Maybe just broadening the conversation a little bit, Lacey. Obviously, you identified a need and it's significant across our sector. One of the things that you mentioned earlier is burnout. And I know that that's a huge issue and it affects many people. And yet, while we have some folks who are willing to speak publicly about it, it's probably still one of those hidden realities that many people are facing. Can you speak to some of that? And I know Balance Good is obviously trying to address that in some
Mhm.
respects. But yeah, just be curious your perspective on where that's at for our sector.
Yeah, I think it's a real place of privilege where I can say, like, I have experienced burnout and I've recovered from it. Because
Mm,
you're right, a lot of people aren't able to come out and speak to that publicly.
yeah.
There's a lot of pressure in our sector, right, to perform, to give all that you have for a cause because
Mm,
these causes are so important and we're helping others and all of these pieces. But the reality is, and it's very similar to parenthood too, you can't take care of anyone if you're not taking care of yourself.
hmm
So we really do need to prioritize in our sector, I think, creating realistic workloads. And for a lot of organizations that we work with or that we've worked with, we've seen unrealistic workloads and we've seen work on plates that is busy work, but not productive work. So
Okay.
how do we remove that from people's plates to make
hmm
sure that they can focus on the things that are driving mission forward?
Right.
So whether it's raising funds or whether it's program delivery, all the time when we're in a role covering a parental leave, we provide like that return to work report that really highlights, here are the things you can do to streamline this role to better support a working parent or just to better support a better work-life balance. And there's actually no work-life balance. It's like
Mm.
work-life blend chaos, or I'm not really sure what it is,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but like, let's just think about it and be intentional about it, I think is the point there.
Yeah. And I thank you for mentioning your own journey in this respect. Is there self-care advice that you could offer to people who are
Oh,
experiencing this?
that's a tough one. I
Yeah.
just read a book about how self-care is often like framed in like these fluffy things, like especially for parents and moms, like go
Mm.
get your nails done, go for a
Right.
walk. But
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that
Yeah.
doesn't help. I think for me, the biggest thing when it comes to self-care is having boundaries,
hmm
setting them and holding them.
Yeah.
And that's really important for everyone in our sector, from leaders to people who are just entering the sector.
hmm
And often that's where I see a lot of struggle is junior team members not being able to hold boundaries because they're trying to, like push forward in their career. So
Yeah.
it's, as leaders, making sure that you're creating these safe spaces where people can hold boundaries and know how to prioritize the work that needs to get done to move mission forward.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. You've entered the world of entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've talked about how this has been a pioneering effort on your behalf. What lessons have you learned around entrepreneurship and business ownership that would be helpful for others to hear?
Oh, I would say that it really isn't for the faint of heart.
hmm
And I didn't realize that I was like strong-willed in this way, but once I was motivated by my desire to make change in the sector, it all
hmm
became very clear. I think people get into entrepreneurship because there's more flex, or that they have this idea that there's more flexibility.
Right.
And I'm sure you can attest to this. There is, but it's also a lot of demand,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So for me, learning very quickly to determine which spaces I was going to show up in, which spaces I weren't, which boundaries I needed to hold, because
hmm
again, I'm a mom to 3 young children.
Yeah.
So how do I navigate all of that? But also, how do I celebrate that my kids get to see me at work building something that's making a change, right? So
hmm
there's a little bit of balance, but yeah, it's not easy work, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're balancing your own good, right?
Yeah,
In
exactly.
the
You're
process.
trying to.
Yeah, so you've aptly named the organization, that's for sure. With respect, then, just as we sort of bring things to a close, how do clients best engage with you? We'll put your website on our show notes as well. But yeah, I'm sure you have sort of an onboarding process with them. So how can they reach out and find you, and what are some initial steps that you'll be able to help them take?
Yeah, I think the best way to reach out to me is LinkedIn or by email,
hmm
which can be found on my website as
Yeah.
well. Really, the first steps are just having a conversation, because we're the first ones to say, like, actually, this role probably isn't a fit for our services, but
Yeah.
here's what we can suggest you do. Or, oftentimes it takes a few conversations because it is a unique and non-traditional way of covering these roles.
hmm
So typically we do meet a couple times to talk through what it would look like, how we map out the deliverables. So, if you have somebody that's going on parental leave that you've just learned about, reach out now, reach out earlier, because
Yeah.
these things take time, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're planning on recruiting a traditional way, that doesn't always work out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good. Like we said, we're happy to be a plan B. What we don't want is your organization to have a staffing gap,
Right.
and you and your team to be burnt out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Lacey, thank you so much for being with us today, and really appreciate your insights and what you're doing for the sector. I think it's very meaningful, and certainly we want to encourage organizations to be prepared for these kinds of transitions. But I think you've got a lot of perspective and answers for them, and so I would just encourage anyone who's listening today or watching this on YouTube to definitely reach out to Lacey if you have some of these transitions that you know about that are coming up. I'm sure she would be happy to speak with you. So we'll put her contact information in our show notes as well. And but Lacey, thank you so much, and just
Thank you.
appreciate your time today.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks again.
Okay.